What should one do when stuck in a traffic jam? One should create a new program. So I present for your delight the 7 habits of highly effective memorization. Would you like to know the 7 habits of highly effective memorization? It starts with your habits. There's loads of stuff in your life that you just know like the back of your hand. That's going to be habit 2 as well. But the easiest way to remember things is to put stuff you want to remember, where you would look for it first. So this is the cliche, a place for everything and everything in its place. So if you do that, but you systematically and deliberately do it, you've set yourself up for memorization success. So that's principle number 1, a place for everything, habit number 1, and everything in its place. Habit number 2 is to realize that everything you do know like the back of your hand has the potential to become a lever to remember everything else. So most of the mnemonic systems, for example, work from a backbone of something that you know automatically with easy memory recall. We'll come to that in a minute. Habit number 3 is learn to mind map. Mind maps were originally called memory maps. They were designed deliberately to work with the way that your right and left hemisphere likes to remember, the way they work together to make things memorable. So learn to mind map or memory map. Fourthly, learn and master. Learn and master the vowels of memory. A, E, I, O, U. These are the memory muscles that sit behind every single system. So the 4th habit is to master A for association, I for imagination, E for emotion, O for order, and U for unusual. So A, association, practice finding links between everything. I'm looking at the number plate in front of me, and if you're stuck in traffic, playing the number plate game is a good way to develop your memory association. So its last 3 letters, I'll keep the rest of it secret in case there's a privacy thing going on here, but its last 3 letters are T, W, A. So I'm going to associate that straight away with Trans World Airlines. I don't even know if there is a Trans World Airline, but that's what came straight into my mind. So if I needed to remember that car, it's a Trans World Airlines car. It's actually a Ford. So there you go. E is for emotion. And seriously, folks, emotion is the biggest muscle of memory. Memories are coded and wrapped and flavored by emotion. Your amygdala and your hippocampus work together through emotion. Your hippocampus might go, hey, that's my cousin. I haven't seen him for 15 years. And your amygdala will give the emotional flavour to that and go, yeah, that was such fun when we were kids, yes! So stick emotion on everything. No, humans are very, very good at something called anthropomorphism, which is where we give human characteristics to things what don't have them. So your cat smiles at you like a human being. Of course it doesn't, but we get more pleasure out of the dog or the cat smiling at us if we anthropomorphize. But that's adding emotion and character to the things we experience, and that makes them more memorable. Excuse me. AEI, imagination. Excuse me. Imagination literally captures your imagination. So you've got like 96% visual recall, even if you don't think you're a visual person. So using images really does help paint 1,000 words into your memory, especially if we use the 7th habit, which we'll get to at number 7. So association, make links. E, add loads and loads and loads and loads of emotion. I, use your imagination, build that muscle. O, order, impose order on everything, and that gives you a little memory path to follow. So if you can see how one thing links to another in order, that really helps. And then U, your brain loves novelty, the unusual. U for unusual. So If you can see the surreal in everything, that makes it far more memorable. Salvador Dali's lobster telephone. Who's going to forget that once you've seen it? Okay, so there's that habit. The fifth habit is to let people out in traffic, because then they'll love you forever and you'll have a beautiful memory. Now, the fifth habit is to use mnemonic systems. Use lots and lots of systems. So, for example, I use a system, because I have to remember names and faces. A lot of people have difficulty remembering people's names. So I use the word faces as a mnemonic, which itself is a memory device, to stand for the 5 characteristics of a strategy, a system to remember people's names. I have no trouble remembering their faces, so we use faces to remember their names. And F stands for focus. So at a networking meeting, for example, it's very, very easy for you to focus on who you want to see at the meeting. And if you get cornered by somebody who you don't want to talk to, you may be tempted not to give them full attention, when you've got no chance of remembering what they say if you do that. Instead, you need to focus on the person like they're the only person in the world that matters to you. Oh, how lovely is that? A is for association, so make an association with the sound of their name. So my pen name is Lex, from my middle name Alexander, and I might introduce myself as, hello, I'm Lex, as in Lex Luthor. C is for chorus, because we Brits, if you're a Brit watching this, are terrified of getting it wrong, aren't we? So it's very, very good to chorus out loud the sound of the person's name. I've got a lovely friend called Katarzyna, who everybody calls Kate, and I'm still not quite convinced, Katarzyna, that I get your name pronounced perfectly in Polish, but it's beautiful. So it was worth chorusing her name until we're both happy with the way I say it. Katarzyna. Okay, chorus. E is for eye contact, and this is a bit scary as well, isn't it? But you don't really connect with somebody until you make eye contact. And if you can make eye contact appropriately to the point where you can tell the colour of their eyes, you've looked into their soul. And then S is for smile, because you're going to get it wrong sometimes, so being a grinner turns you into a winner, doesn't it? I remember a wonderful headmaster at one of the schools, at one of the teacher training colleges I went to, and I was training the teachers in these memory techniques, and he said, I have to say I've been a fan of these techniques for years, but there was one time where it went very, very wrong. And he said, I had a very shy school secretary, and for 6 months I called her Mrs. Wyatt, and she went on an assertiveness program and came back, and I was her project. And she came up to me and she said, Headmaster. And I said, yes, Mrs. Wyatt. She said, for 6 months you've been calling me Mrs. Wyatt. And he said, yes, Mrs. Wyatt. She said, my name is Mrs. Earp. So he'd used association, but he'd memorised the wrong bit. So it's very useful in that situation just to smile and say, hey, I'm only human, and they'll forgive you. So there's an example of a mnemonic system. So our habits then in order. First of all, a place for everything, and everything in its place. Second, memory principle. I've forgotten. It's good, isn't it? I've made it up today and I've forgotten it already. Third memory principle is mind mapping. Fourth memory principle is the vowels of memory. Oh, I know what the second principle was. The second principle was everything you know can become a lever for the stuff you want to learn. So the stuff you know, like the back of your hand, can become a lever for the stuff you want to learn. That was embarrassing, wasn't it? Hey, I'm smiling. Fourth principle, learn the vowels of memory: association, emotion, imagination, order, and the unusual. And the fifth principle, fifth habit, is to use memory systems. So I gave you an example of the faces there. The sixth habit is to make sense of your memory. And the idea here is so simple. The more senses you pay conscious attention to when memorizing something, the more triggers you have and the more your memory makes sense. So I had a lovely meal tonight of spaghetti bolognese. It was actually sort of lasagna bolognese. And if I was to use all my senses, I could tell you what it smelled like. It was beautifully tomatoey and cheesy. I could tell you what it tasted like. It tasted like bolognese, very nice bolognese, but specifically mushrooms, as well as the beef and the tomatoes and the herbs. I could tell you what it looked like. It was beautifully presented in a pasta bowl. I can tell you what it sounded like while you ate it, but that was a bit squelchy. And I can tell you what I felt like when I ate it. I felt satisfied. So see it, hear it, feel it, taste it, smell it will help you make sense and give you more memory recall triggers. And then the 7th habit is to harness the power and the rhythm of review. Now the interesting thing is that you can borrow from the energy, the flow of an experience for probably 24 hours. That's the strongest part of the memory trace. If you don't revisit your recall of that experience within 24 hours, the pathway begins to fade. It's not lost, but your ability to recall it is diminished. So what you need to do is to follow the rhythm that I was taught by Tony Buzan and Van der North. It's an exciting rhythm. So there's a spike in memory recall 5 to 10 minutes, in the 5 to 10 minutes after a significant event. So if you were to allow a 5 to 10 minute gap between meetings, for example, or between lessons, and you were to use that 5 to 10 minutes to review what you had learned in that meeting or learned in that lesson, you would already be ahead of the memory recall curve. That would really help you. Then do something within the first hour, the first day, the first week, the first month, and the first season. So I'm going to give those to you again. Do some sort of recall activity in the first 5 to 10 minutes, within the first hour, within the first day, within the first week, the first month, and the first season. So let's suppose that you're in business and you want to be remembered for the right reasons, and you're a plumber, and you get called out by somebody who's facing an emergency. They're in trouble. You are the answer to their prayers. So you say that you will turn up at a certain time, and you turn up at that time. That's a first impression that they're going to remember. So after you have completed the needs and solved their problem, if you ring up within the 5 to 10 minutes after the event and just say, I put some seal round the joint there, if you could leave that to dry for the next hour or so, that would be good. And may I ring you in an hour just to check that you're happy with how that's sealed up. I don't know, I'm not a plumber, but you know what I mean. You need to find something on their wavelength, something that's of interest to them, that you can go back to them in 5 to 10 minutes, an hour, a day. So the next day you might pop by and say, is that okay, you're happy with that? And I've brought you a magnet for your boiler to remind you of the 5 things to avoid having to call me out this winter. Then a week later you send them a thank you card. A month later, an update, a newsletter that's got loads of useful free stuff for them. And then 3 months time, something else that's of interest to them. If you were to then practice that review rhythm in your customer delight system, you would be remembered for wonderful reasons. And when they have a plumbing problem, who are they going to call? It's going to be you. So there you go, the 7 habits of highly effective memorization. Habit 1, have a place for everything and everything in its place. Habit 2, realize that everything you know already can become a lever to remember new stuff. Habit 3, learn to mind map. Habit 4, master the vowels of memory: association, emotion, imagination, order, and the unusual. Habit 5, learn memory systems like the faces system we used. Habit 6, add more senses to everything you want to remember and learn. And habit 7, use the rhythm of review, the habit of review. 5 to 10 minutes after event, an hour after event, a day after, a month, and a season. I missed out a week, didn't I? 5 to 10 minutes, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 season. And that's why sometimes getting stuck in traffic is great.